Krishna comes. Now, for your information, there's a section starting with verse 63. After Narada completes giving instruction to Dhruva, Narada goes to visit the king, knowing, because we heard yesterday evening, Narada is Trikala Gya. He knows past, present, future. He knows what's going on with the king. The king is feeling terrible. We'll hear that shortly. But for now, we're starting with text 78, we're skipping 63 to 77, and going to what Dhruva does in the forest. And it's pretty astounding what Dhruva does in the forest. Now, as a reminder, Dhruva Maharaj, we're at the beginning stages of the cosmic manifestation. Brahma has just built the universe, and Brahma wants to then populate the universe. And so one of the things Brahma does, along with populating the universe, is he creates the first Manu and his wife from his own body. Very interesting. They appear in their adult feature, kind of like Krishna did, appearing in the prison house of Kamsa. He was in his full adult feature, or mature four-armed form. Shata Rupa and Swayambhuva Manu appeared as adults, just boop, from the body of Lord Brahma. And so we're hearing about the lineages of kings from Swayambhuva Manu to King Uttanapada. And it hasn't happened yet, but Dhruva is going to become the next king. So here we go. Dhruva Maharaj has received instructions from Narada. And here, look at this. We're going to start with text 63. Isn't that nice? So, at text 63, meanwhile, back in the palace of King Uttanapada, the narrator, Shukadev Goswami, it's not Shukadev, it's Maitreya. After Dhruva entered the Madhavan forest to execute devotional service, the great sage Narada thought it wise to go to the king to see how he was faring within the palace. The king doesn't look very happy. When Narada Muni approached, the king received him properly, offering him due obeisances. After being seated comfortably, Narada begins to speak. Now, Narada is compassionate. So he knows already without even asking, but he's going to ask. Even though the king was in distress and in lamentation, he did not fail to receive the saintly Narada Muni with all respect. That's an important cultural item for us. Now, I don't always do so well with this one, but it's a cultural item. Sometimes we're like, it's me, sometimes I'm so focused on a situation, I kind of have blinders on and don't see anything peripheral vision. And it's not good. So being focused is good. And being respectful to others who are to be respected is also good. So what do? While staying focused on what's of very great importance, you also maintain social etiquette. Any action or behavior involves these stages, thinking, feeling, willing. That's the mind, right? Before there's an action, there's thinking, feeling, willing, what takes place in the mind. What are some character-based thoughts and feelings that would propel us to offer all respect to others despite our own troubled state of mind in a given situation? Well, it takes training. And, training in its matured stage looks like culture. Training in its mature stage is culture, and you don't even really have to think about it when it's when you have culture. I'm going to make a comment just now about Bhakti Rasa. She's a cultured lady. Yesterday, we went all the way to Corvallis, and the traffic was really bad. So it took us, some of you, those of you from America, over the river and through the woods. To grandmother's house we go. So the GPS was taking us all these back routes and everything because the interstate was just packed. Traffic for, the long parking lot. So it took us in the roundabout way. It took us a long time to get there. We were late, but it was okay because he had nice kirtan before we got there. And then when it was time to come back, she wasn't in the car. And I asked, what happened? Well, she wanted to accompany our technician here to because it's a long drive at night. Because we didn't get back till 11 o'clock last night. So she didn't have to think about it. Just like Snehavali should have a companion because it's a long drive at night. You don't have to think about it. It just becomes natural if you're a cultured person. And on our way over here, we were waiting to pull out of, this little road that goes into Jai Satchidanandan's home. And we're sitting there, the traffic is going, and there was another car that needed to turn to get in to where we were pulling out of. So Jai Satchidanandana pulled back. And that finally, the traffic stopped. And then the car behind everybody, there's a big long line of cars. The fellow stopped and waited for us to exit, to get ahead of him. Who does that? This is America. Go, 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 go. But I was like, wow. A courtesy, unprovoked courtesy. No, so kindness is natural for those who are kind and those who have that mode of goodness. What to speak of refined culture of Vedic training. When you meet a very refined, cultured person, it's really nice. Doesn't take much to go, wow. They're very, very refined people. When you find them, that's nice. So, Nard is such a person. So Narada went back to see how's the king doing. So I'm going to read, starting with verse 64. The great sage Narada inquired, "My dear king, your face appears to be withering up, and you look like you've been thinking of something for a very long time. Why is that? Have you been hampered in following your path of religious rites, economic development, and sense gratification?" The king replied, "O best of the Brahmanas, I am very much addicted to my wife, and I am so fallen that I have abandoned all merciful behavior, even to my son, who is only 5 years old. I have banished him and his mother, even though he is a great soul and a great devotee. My dear Brahmana, the face of my son was just like a lotus flower. I am thinking of his precarious condition. He is unprotected, and he might be very hungry. He might have lain down somewhere in the forest, and the wolves might have attacked him to eat his body. Alas, just see how I was conquered by my wife. Just imagine my cruelty. Out of love and affection, the boy was trying to get up on my lap, but I did not receive him, nor did I even pat him for a moment. Just imagine how hard-hearted I am." So there's the how hard-hearted I am. So Narada knew what was going on because he's like Super Soul. He knows what's going on in other people's hearts. And so here's the next verse, text 68. You can read it. The great sage Narada replied, "My dear king, please do not be aggrieved about your son. He is well protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although you have no actual information of his influence, his reputation is already spread all over the world. Celebrated person. My dear king, your son is very competent. He will perform activities which would be impossible, even for great kings and sages. Very soon he will complete his task and come back home. You should know that he will also spread your reputation all over the world." The great sage Maitreya continued, "The king Uttanapada, after being advised by Narada Muni, practically gave up all duties in relation with his kingdom, which was very vast and wide, opulent, like the goddess of fortune, and he simply began to think of his son Dhruva." Purifying, because he's thinking of a pure devotee. Elsewhere, Dhruva Maharaj, having arrived at Madhuvan, took his bath in the river Jamuna and observed fasting in the night with great care and attention. After that, as advised by the great sage Narada, he engaged himself in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the story unfolds. A little bit about Sharanagati, or taking shelter. Now, when you're in a forest, what's your shelter? You guys live out here in the country. You don't like it. What's your shelter? How do you get protection? How can one live in the forest and not be taken care of by anyone? By the personality of Godhead. Given by a great authority, Narada Muni, is that such persons are well protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sharanagati, or surrender, means acceptance. There's that word again. This is fourth class in a row, acceptance, or firm belief that wherever the surrendered soul lives, he is always protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is never unprotected or alone. Anyone who engages in devotional service anywhere within this universe is never unprotected. So remember, when he went into the forest, we saw this painting before. When he went into the forest, he couldn't see anything. But now he's observing this fasting. And he sat down, as he was told by Narada, and began worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's a nice story because there's lots of illustrations. Our only concern should be, this is Prabhupada's purport, how to execute the order of the spiritual master. The spiritual master is expert in giving special instructions to each of his disciples, and if the disciple executes the order of the spiritual master, that is the way of his perfection. Nice. Nice. So Dhruva's got a great spiritual master, and he's doing everything as he was told. Now you want to hear about these super duper austerities, ones that we can't even think of imitating, so don't even think about it, because you can't. Here's what he did. We covered this the very first class. For the first month, Dhruva ate only fruits and berries on every third day. For a month. Only to keep his body and soul together, and in this way he progressed in his worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the second month, he ate only every 6 days. And for his eatables, he took dry grass and leaves. Yummy, right? Every 6 days. Thus, he continued his worship. In the 3rd month, he drank only water every 9 days for a month. Thus, he remained completely in trance and worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was adored by selected verses. In the 4th month, what's next? Dhruva Maharaj became a complete master of the breathing exercise, and thus he inhaled air only every 12th day. In this way, he became completely fixed in his position and worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By the 5th month, Maharaj Dhruva, the son of the king, had controlled his breathing so perfectly that he was able to stand only on one leg, like you see, just as a column stands, without motion, and concentrate his mind fully on the Para Brahman. He completely controlled the senses and their objects, and in this way he fixed his mind without diversion to anything else upon the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now we heard about the form that was advised by Narada, and he's envisioning this form within his heart with deep absorption. Now, when he did this intense meditation, the whole universe began to tremble. Here's what text 78 says. When Dhruva Maharaj thus captured the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the refuge of the total material creation, and who is the master of all living entities, the 3 worlds began to tremble. Now, we had this question 2 classes in a row, so I'll go to it again. How is this possible? Because we know of yogis that are able to control their senses, rare cases, but they're able to control their senses. Why is the whole world trembling? Then the next one is, as he was standing with his one foot, it was depressing the earth down. And then the third one is, while he was suspending his breathing, the universe became choked up. Now, we know of yogis that are able to suspend their breathing. So why is the universe getting choked up? Why is the earth getting pressed down? Why is the whole earth trembling? And the answer is, compliments of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, is because of the devotion, the intimacy of devotion that Dhruva felt for the Supreme Lord. He became one with the Supreme Lord, not Sayuja oneness, but spiritual oneness. He became as heavy as the Supreme Lord. He became, the suspending of breathing was as if the Supreme Lord was suspending breathing. The flow of air through the universe stopped because he stopped. That means his austerities were out of this world, and his power was also otherworldly, like Lord Vishnu. He became powerful like Lord Vishnu. One could say he became empowered. Not considered a Shaktivesh avatar, but like that. He became powerful like the Lord. The phrase you see in the yellow letters, Dara Yamanasya, means taken into the heart. And Trayo Lokas Chakampire, the 3 worlds began to tremble. He's an intense little boy. He's not trying to tremble the world or the universe, but he's a powerful little boy. How is this possible for Dhruva Maharaj to capture Brahman within his heart? That's a question asked by our acharyas. Jiva Goswami gives an answer. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the origin of Brahman. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the origin of Brahman, for since he comprises everything material and spiritual, there cannot be anything greater. That's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Many persons, especially the Mayavadi philosophers, consider Brahman the biggest, all-expanding substance. But, according to this verse and other Vedic literatures such as Bhagavad Gita, the resting place of Brahman is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just as the resting place of sunshine is the sun globe. Therefore, Srila Jiva Goswami concludes that since the transcendental form of the Lord is the seed of all greatness, he is the Supreme Brahman. Since the Supreme Brahman was situated in the heart of Dhruva, he became heavier than the heaviest. And therefore everything trembled in all the three worlds and in the spiritual world, Jiva Goswami says. He was a very powerful little boy, 5 years old. A little bit on what things you already know. On the left is a painting, an illustration of Brahman feature, the Paramatma feature, the Vishnu, and Bhagavan feature. These three features are all contained within the Bhagavan feature. By associating constantly with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his heart, Dhruva Maharaj naturally became equal to the greatest Brahman by his association, and thus became the heaviest, and the entire universe trembled. This was your question yesterday. Next verse, text 79. As Dhruva Maharaj, the king's son, kept himself steadily standing on one leg, the pressure of his big toe pushed down half the earth. Just as an elephant being carried on a boat rocks the boat left and right with his every step. It's pretty hard to get this illustration, I can tell you. An elephant in a boat in the middle of the sea. Not a normal illustration. Here's further reference. When Dhruva Maharaj was at home, although he was a king's son, he was prevented from getting on the lap of his father. But when he became advanced in self-realization or devotional service, by the pressure of his toe, he could push down the whole earth. That is the difference between ordinary consciousness and Krishna consciousness. Obviously, this is Prabhupada's purport. In ordinary consciousness, as a king's son maybe refused something, even by his father. But when the same person becomes fully Krishna conscious within his heart, he can push down the earth with the pressure of his toe. Now, how much did the earth get pressed down? I was curious, so I did some research. The word that's used is pradesha. Pradesha. Pradesha is a measurement of distance. Vishwanath Chakravarti explains, the earth sank down a half a pradesha, or half of 5 inches. What's half of 5 inches? 2.5 inches. And in Prabhupada's writings elsewhere, the research I did, 1 pradesha is 6 and sometimes 8 inches. So, a little bit. It wasn't like he created a valley or something. A few inches. When Dhruva Maharaj became practically one in heaviness with Lord Vishnu, the total consciousness, this is Vishwanath's commentary, Vishvam Atmanaha, due to his fully concentrating and closing all the holes of his body, the total universal breathing became choked up, And all the great demigods in all the planetary systems felt suffocated and took shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They went to the abode of Vishnu, appealing, we can't breathe. What's going on? Never had this experience before. Help. Prabhupada explains, the example of Dhruva Maharaj is closing the holes of his personal body and thereby closing the breathing holes of the total universe clearly indicates that a devotee, by his personal devotional service, can influence all the people of the whole world to become devotees of the Lord. Can you think of any example? Srila Prabhupada. Absolutely. Prabhupada writes, if there is only one pure devotee in pure Krishna consciousness, he can change the total consciousness of the world into Krishna consciousness. Now, it wasn't effortless. But the potency was there, and a lot of transformation of consciousness was going on. Now, the demigods take shelter of the Supreme Lord, beginning with this prayer, Dear Lord, you are the refuge of all moving and non-moving living entities. We feel all living entities to be suffocating. Their breathing processes choked up. We have never experienced such a thing. Since you are the ultimate shelter of all surrendered souls, we have therefore approached you. Kindly save us from this danger. Beautiful painting, isn't it? There's the ocean of milk. So the approach was made to the Lord in Svetadweep. In Svetadweep, there's this ocean of milk, and then the island in the middle of the ocean of milk. So there's some big milk waves there. And the demigods are making their appeal, headed by Lord Brahma and many other demigods. Prabhupada's purport. The Supreme Lord is the ultimate goal for the solution to all problems within this material world. In the spiritual world, there are no problems, but the material world is always problematic. And further in the purport, he explains some of the Sanskrit. Devotees are free from all problems because they are fully surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For a devotee, everything in the world is very pleasing because he knows how to use everything in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. You've heard this phrase, Vishvam Purna Sukhayate. Prabhupada would refer to it regularly. Vishvam, which means the universe. Purna Sukhayate. Everything is very pleasing in the universe. Vishvam Purnam Sukhayate. So the demigods appealed. Here's the personality of Godhead's reply. My dear demigods, do not be perturbed by this. It is due to the severe austerity and full determination of the son of King Uttanapada, who is now fully absorbed in thought of me. He has obstructed the universal breathing process. You can safely return to your respective homes. I shall stop this boy in his severe acts of austerities, and you will be saved from this situation. That's text 82. Commentary. He has simply concentrated his mind on me. This will not destroy anything. So that's the end of the chapter. Yay, we finished one chapter. Chapter 8. Now begins chapter 9. Dhruva returns home. That's the chapter heading, Prabhupada's chapter heading. He didn't go home yet. He's going to eventually make it there. We are going to hear how the Lord, the beginning verses, the Lord appears and empowers Dhruva to speak. Many, many, many nice paintings of the Lord appearing. So Maitreya is continuing to speak to Vidura. When the demigods were thus reassured by the personality of Godhead, they were freed from all fears, and after offering their obeisances, they returned to their heavenly planets. Then, the Lord, who was not different from the Sahasra Shirsha incarnation. What's the Sahasra Shirsha incarnation? Sahasra Shirsha Purusha Sahasraksha Sahasrapat. What's that? Purusha Sukta. What's Purusha Sukta? It's a prayer from the Rig Veda that when demigods go to the shore of the Milk Ocean, they offer Purusha Sukta prayers. It's a prayer to the Purusha, Lord Vishnu, who has Sahasra Shirsha, who has thousands of heads and thousands of arms and thousands of thises and that's. The Lord, who is not different from the Sahasra Shirsha incarnation, got on the back of Garuda, Vishnu, who carried him to Madhuvan forest to see his servant, Dhruva. The Sanskrit in the verse, Madhur, Vanam, Brityu, Didrikshaya Gata. So with the help of Garuda, he went to see his servant, Dhruva. And some nice illustrations of Lord Vishnu riding on the back of Garuda. Garuda's got a little snack there, just in case he gets hungry. There's food for birds like Garuda's snakes. Prabhupada's purport. According to Srila Sanatana Goswami, in his Bhagavatamrita, the Sahasra Shirsha personality of Godhead, who appeared at that time, was the incarnation of Prishnigarbha. What does that mean? Who is Prishnigarbha anyways? Who is Prishnigarbha? Is the son of Sutapa and Prishni, right? Is that right? You don't know? You know who Krishna is. And when Krishna appeared in the prison house of Kamsa, I'm going to ask you a question, so pay attention. When Krishna appeared in the prison house of Kamsa, and Vasudeva offered his prayers, Devaki offered her prayers, and Krishna spoke. What did Krishna say? I am your son, but in 2 previous incarnations I also appeared as your son. You ready? In the first of those times, previously, you were Sutapa and Prishni. Sutapa is the male, and Prishni is his wife. And they underwent long austerities. And then Vishnu came before them and said, you please me very much. Not only I appear as your son, for 3 times I'll appear as your son. So this is in Satya Yuga. Satya Yuga. He appeared as the son of Sutapa and Prishni, and his name was? Prishnigarbha. Prishnigarbha. And then the next Yuga, what comes after Satya Yuga? Treta Yuga, very good. And in the Treta Yuga, he appeared as Vamana. And who is Vamana the son of? Very good. Now, Krishna appeared in which yuga? Dwapara Yuga. He appeared as son of Vasudeva and Devaki. Now, just yesterday, somebody from China wanted to know what's the relationship between Sutapa and Prishni and Vasudeva and Devaki. Are they the same entity? And with some research, it turns out they, Sutapa and Prishni, are Vibhuti expansions. What's Vibhuti? Chapter 11, Bhagavad Gita. Vibhuti, opulences, right? Vibhuti Yoga. Vibhuti Yoga, chapter 11. So they're vibhutis of it means expansions, and vibhutis of the original and eternal Vasudeva and Devaki in Krishna Loka. Because in Krishna Loka there's 3 divisions: Vrindavan, Mathura, and Dwarka. So they appear in Mathura and in Dwarka, Vasudeva and Devaki. They're involved in Krishna's pastimes in those 2 places. And their vibhuti expansion is Sutapa and Prishni. So Prabhupada writes, he, this Prishni Garbha or Vishnu, provided the planet known as Dhruva Loka for the habitation of Dhruva Maharaj. That's Dhruva Loka. Provided by Lord Vishnu. Vishwanath writes, it is understood from Laghu Bhagavatamrita that the avatar who appeared in front of Dhruva was Prishni Garbha. Far out, huh? You got it? So Prishni Garbha was the son of Sutapa and Prishni during that same yuga, Satya Yuga, and that same Prishni Garbha is the one that appeared before Dhruva. He is called Sahasra Shirsha, which refers to Garbho Dakshai Vishnu, because they are non-different, both being Vishnu. So Garbho Dakshai Vishnu, let's step back. Garbho Dakshai Vishnu expands into each and every universe that comes from the body of Mahavishnu. And then that Garbho Dakshai Vishnu expands into each atom of the universe as Shirodakshai Vishnu, and in the spiritual planet within each universe as Shirodakshai Vishnu in the ocean of milk, Shir. So it's that ocean of milk that the demigods went to, correct? The spiritual planet that's within this universe, that's where they went. They appealed, help, we can't breathe. So he, from the spiritual world, descended, but because they're non-different, one can say he's also Garbho Dakshai Vishnu descended. Or one can also say Prishni Garbha descended, or one can say Sahasra Shirsha descended. And it's not, if this can't be that, if that can't be this, there's not contradiction because they're non-different. Now, for the binary processor called the mind, it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't compute. If it's a 1, it's not a 0. If it's a 0, it's not a 1. It doesn't work. But if you're going to be a transcendentalist, you can't just use your binary processor. You have to recognize transcendence doesn't fit the norms of a binary processor. You're not going to understand transcendence through the mind. How are you going to understand it? Through the source of knowledge that's perfect. Krishna is that source of knowledge that's perfect. He's the source of the Vedas. Vyasadev's writing them down, and that's how we know. So nomenclature can be different and non-different. It's quite okay, because that's the higher reality, which binary processors can't handle. It bounces. If it's this, it can't be that. If it's that, it can't be this. Well, they can be different and the same. That's Lord Chaitanya's teaching. So nomenclature refers to a feature of one entity, but that one entity can have multiple nomenclatures. Yes? Good. You don't look too convinced. But that's a transcendental reality. Okay, here we go. We're getting close to the finish line. Verse 2 out of 5, the beginning of chapter 9. The form of the Lord, which was brilliant like lightning, and in which Dhruva Maharaj in his mature yogic process was fully absorbed in meditation, all of a sudden disappeared from his heart, because he was fixed on his heart, on that form of the Lord, described by Narada. Thus Dhruva was perturbed, and his meditation broke. But as soon as he opened his eyes, he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally present, just as he had been seeing the Lord in his heart. Wow, that's like 5 different sources, and then he comes in front of him. His Shiradaksha Vishnu, his Garbhadaksha Vishnu, his Sastra Shirsha, and he's within his heart. Voila. Here's a nice passage, how the gopis were able to see Krishna, or the residents of Vrindavan. In their trance of separation, the devotees of Braja are aware of nothing but Krishna. Their ecstasy is so deep that as a natural effect of remembering Krishna, they see him physically before them. Other pure devotees, whose love for Krishna is not on the same level of perfection, have separate experiences of him, internally and externally. Dhruva, for example, concentrated his mind on Lord Vishnu in deep meditation, but his internal vision of the Lord did not expand into a vision outside like that of the gopis. Only when Lord Vishnu came to Dhruva to offer him special mercy did the Lord disappear from Dhruva's heart to show himself externally. Conclusion: the gopis are more spiritually elevated. Doesn't, like, we don't look down our nose at Dhruva and saying he's na 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 na. He's at the stage of perfection, and then there's more perfect, and the gopis are most perfect. Prabhupada writes, in Brahma Samhita it is said, Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena, a saintly person who has developed love of Godhead by devotional service always sees the Lord's transcendental form of Shyamasundar. This Shyamasundar form of the Lord within the heart of a devotee is not imaginary. Who is this a painting of? Do you recognize? Playing on the musical instrument there. Who is that? I'm asking your son here. I'm just keeping them engaged so that they feel part of the gathering today. Do you know who it is? Starts with a B. Bilva Mangala. He was blind, but he could see Krishna within his heart. And he sang glories of Krishna so wonderfully. Krishna came and sat and listened. And you could tell, because the fragrance of Krishna's body was so sweet. He would tell Krishna, I know you're there. Prabhupada writes, when a devotee becomes mature in his prosecution of devotional service, he sees face to face the same Shyamasundar he has thought of during the entire course of his devotional service. When, oh when will that day be ours? Here's a reflection. We remain with the bhakti process given by our acharyas, and Krishna comes and stays with us. That's the receiving Krishna message. Attaining Krishna, receiving Krishna. Okay, we're moving on to text 3. When Dhruva Maharaj saw his Lord just in front of him, he was greatly agitated and offered him obeisances and respect. He fell flat before him like a rod and became absorbed in love of Godhead. Dhruva Maharaj in ecstasy, looking upon the Lord as if he were drinking the Lord with his eyes, kissing the lotus feet of the Lord with his mouth, and embracing the Lord with his arms. Means he didn't do those things, but it is if. He was so absorbed. There's many dozens of nice paintings by different artists depicting the scene. There's Lord Vishnu with his gada and his chakra and his shankha. And I don't see the lotus flower because he's holding his hand ready to touch the head of Dhruva. There he is riding in the back of Garuda. All these features, Prabhupada's purport, of Dhruva Maharaj's bodily expression indicate that upon seeing the Lord face to face, he developed the 8 kinds of transcendental ecstasy in his body. Almost done. First 4 out of 5. Although Dhruva Maharaj was a small boy, he wanted to offer prayers to the personality of Godhead in suitable language, but because he was inexperienced, he could not adjust himself immediately. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, being situated in everyone's heart, could understand Dhruva Maharaj's awkward position. Out of his causeless mercy, he touched his conch shell to the forehead of Dhruva Maharaj, who stood before him with folded hands. Now he's already gotten the hand of Narada, now he's getting the conch shell of the personality of Godhead. Prabhupada writes, the personality of Godhead being situated in everyone's heart specifically gives a devotee intelligence to describe him. It is therefore understood that when a devotee writes or speaks about the personality of Godhead, his words are dictated by the Lord from within. Nice illustration. Prabhupada's doing his Bhaktivedanta purports, and Krishna is dictating the words. That's the consciousness of an instrument of Krishna. Some of you have probably heard. As busy as Prabhupada was, from time to time, he would request some devotee to come and just read to him from his Bhaktivedanta purports. And he would sit sometimes for hours just listening. I would pause and say, I have not written these books. Krishna has written these books. Kind of a mystical statement, but that was in fact his realization. I'm going to read something that I think you'll like. I hope I can find it quickly. Well, it's not showing up. Well, this is maybe where it is. It's, what I'm looking for is Prabhupada, okay, here we go. Prabhupada on Janmashtami in 1954 in Jhansi. This is coming from Prabhupada's first disciple, who was a Sanskrit professor, Acharya Prabhakar Mishra from Jhansi. And it's an interview that was conducted by one of Prabhupada's disciples named Bahushira for the purpose of the Lamrita. And so in interviewing Acharya Prabhakar Mishra, the interview says, on Krishna Janmashtami, Prabhupada was in Janmashtami, 1954. Acharya Prabhakar woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning and heard Srila Prabhupada ecstatically playing mridanga in the temple room. When he went and saw Srila Prabhupada dancing around the temple room performing kirtan, wearing a kadamba flower garland that went all the way down to his feet. Kadamba flowers are very rare in Jhansi, and when they are available, they're usually the size of golf balls. Now, Kadamba flowers are round; they're not like blossoming flowers. They're round like a ball. But in Jhansi, when they're available, it's the size of a golf ball. But the garland that Prabhupada was wearing was the size of a tennis ball, really big. Kadamba flowers. The entire room was surcharged with the fragrance of heavenly planets. So he asked, where did this garland come from? It's not available in the market. But Srila Prabhupada would not answer. His divine grace just kept on performing kirtan, chanting and dancing around the room, 1 o'clock in the morning, Krishna Janmashtami. The next morning, which is Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja, Acharya Prabhakar asked Srila Prabhupada, where did you get the garland? Why did it have such rich fragrance? And why were you feeling so blissful? Srila Prabhupada replied, I was chanting to Krishna and feeling some love for him, and he appeared and gave me this garland. I went to touch his feet, and he disappeared. Because of that, I was dancing around the temple room. Srila Prabhupada then began crying. There's more. So Prabhupada had, he didn't often reveal what his experiences with Krishna was. He didn't reveal his mystic powers. He explained why. Because people would be attracted to mystic powers instead of to Krishna. So he didn't reveal them. But one of the devotees who was with Srila Prabhupada when they were installing Radha London Ishwara, maybe you've read about the very interesting incident of Prabhupada visiting this man's home that had very large, now installed in Soho Street, Radha London Ishwara deities. That first they were installed in Soho and then to the Soho Street. That Bury Place was the first, then the Soho Street temple. They went to their home. Prabhupada asked, are you worshiping the deity? He said, no, they're statues. Prabhupada said, if you like, we can worship them. He said, that would be very nice. Prabhupada was prepared. He nodded. The devotees picked up the deity and walked out of the man's place. And the man was running after them saying, wait. Prabhupada didn't respond. He just kept walking and took the deities and installed the deities. Now, normally we don't do things like that. That's not so nice. But for Krishna, he was prepared to do that. That's the exception, not the rule. And then when they were making the altar, so one of the devotees told me that they had these 4 marble columns and a marble canopy over the 4 columns, and they're placing the deities prior to the installation under this canopy, marble canopy, and the columns started to tilt. And this big marble slab was really big and really heavy. Prabhupada, shorter than his American disciples, they were struggling what to do. He stood there and held it up, like Superman, until they could position the columns properly and the deity was secured and not harmed. Now, Prabhupada did make a big deal about being Superman, but he had mystic powers that he could use when needed for Krishna's service. It took 4 men to lift the marble slab up. Prabhupada held it up himself. So he didn't go around boasting about his powers or his intimate relationship with Krishna. But we can know that that's the place of consciousness that he was in. We're almost done. When Dhruva Maharaj felt hesitant, not knowing how to describe the Lord for want of sufficient experience, the Lord, out of his causeless mercy, touched his conch shell to Dhruva's forehead, and he was transcendently inspired. This transcendental inspiration is called Brahmamaya, because when one is thus inspired, the sound he produces exactly corresponds to the sound vibration of the Vedas. This is not the ordinary sound vibration of this material world. Therefore, the sound vibration of the Hare Krishna mantra, although presented in the ordinary alphabet, should not be taken as mundane or material. And confirmation of this is from Hari Bhakti Sudodaya. When he achieved what he achieved, he said this famous phrase, Swamin Katartosmi Varam Nayache. O my Lord, because I was seeking an opulent material position, I was performing severe types of penance and austerity. Now I have gotten you for very difficult, for the great demigods, saintly persons, and kings to attain. I was searching after a piece of glass, but instead I have found a most valuable jewel. Swamin Katartosmi Varam Nayache. Therefore I am satisfied, so satisfied, that I do not wish for any benediction from you. From Hari Bhakti Sudodaya. Jiva Goswami's commentary. These are the words of Dhruva. They do not spring from full realization of the sweet aspect of the Lord's. These words arose from the touch of the Lord's conch. However, it is evident that gradually he obtained that relation. That's a refinement from our acharyas. The final verse. At that time, Dhruva Maharaj became perfectly aware of the Vedic conclusion and understood the absolute truth and his relationship with all living entities in accordance with the line of devotional service to the Supreme Lord, whose fame is widespread. Dhruva, who in the future will receive a planet which would never be annihilated, even during the time of dissolution, offered his deliberate and conclusive prayers. So that's the conclusion for this evening's class. We're going to hear Prahlad's prayers, Dhruva's prayers. Prabhupada's purport. Dhruva Maharaj never went to any school, not even homeschooling, or academic teacher to learn the Vedic conclusion. But because of his devotional service to the Lord, as soon as the Lord appeared and touched his forehead with his conch shell, automatically the entire Vedic conclusion was revealed to him. Whew. You ready? Let's find the Lord's conch shell and have him touch our head. The Vedas indicate that the only one who has unflinching faith, only to one who has unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord as well as the spiritual master, is the Vedic conclusion revealed. This is our last slide. That's the verse. Yasya Devi Parabhaktir. Tata Yata Deve Tata Guru. Tasyaite Pratika Katita Yarta Prakashante Mahatmana. The Vedas are revealed to such a person. And Dhruva was such a person, although he hadn't gone to school yet. That's like Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma, that everything was revealed to Lord Brahma. Everything was revealed to Dhruva. And Brahma didn't get a touch of the conch shell. He got the sound of Krishna's flute. And everything became revealed. I mean, not at once. His purification. He's a hero. Now, we can't imitate, obviously, but we can understand the principles that were operating in his life, and that's what these 7 keys are. And he heard from Narada, and he followed what Narada said. He did it pretty intensely, inhumanly intensely. And Lord Vishnu came and benedicted him. So we're going to hear in the evening class what were those prayers that he offered. And obviously the first one is going to be a prayer of humility. First one. That's how he's feeling, and gratitude. That's how he's feeling. Then so many nice glorifications of Lord Vishnu. Okay, let's see if there's some discussion. You've been very patiently sitting, and I expected some people might have gotten a little sleepy after lunch, but you did pretty well. Okay, where's our portable mic?
Maharaj, I had a question about the Prishnigarbha incarnation of the Lord. He was the son of Sutapa and Prishni. So apart from this incident where he appears in front of Dhruva Maharaj, do we hear anything else about his appearance?
I haven't. If you come across something, please let me know.
Okay, thank you. One more unrelated question.
Sure.
So the demigods approached the Supreme Lord near the Milk Ocean to pray. We see similar scene when Krishna, in the first chapter of Krishna book, like when the earth was, when the demigods again go so that the Lord can appear here. And
yes.
At that time, I think it was that they have to pray through Lord Brahma, and he receives the message. Like a transmission, not it's.
Yes,
if I remember,
he hears and they don't hear.
Yeah, they don't hear. That's the thing. Like,
yes.
So, but here they are hearing. I mean, that's how at least the picture showed. And is there a difference in these two situations? No. Okay.
Whether it specifies that Brahma alone heard and then Brahma conveyed, or they all heard and therefore they knew. There isn't specification here, and it could very well be that's how it happened. Same as appealing for Krishna to appear in later yuga. There's no information, so we can't say, and our acharyas haven't commented, so we can't say. I mean, there's a good likelihood it was similar, if not identical.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I just have a clarifying, just like, I'm going to say how I heard it, and then you can tell me whether...
Okay.
Yeah. So, Prahlad Maharaj, not Prahlad, Dhruva Maharaj, he was one with the Supreme Lord because of association with the Supreme Lord within him.
There's a qualifier. there's the intimacy, yes, but there's an intimacy of that connection that's unique. There's a further intimacy of the gopis, even more than Dhruva, at this stage. But there's an intimacy of that connection. He was not just, doing some austerities and became powerful. He had a very intimate connection with Lord Vishnu. That's the oneness that made him very heavy, etc.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. When you were mentioning about Uttanapada, when Narada Muni went and visited him, he was lamenting about Dhruva Maharaj and thinking of, you mentioned that he was getting purified by thinking of a pure devotee.
Yes.
So do we get purified by thinking of pure devotees?
Oh, yes.
Even?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Not kind of, but absolutely.
Okay. Is it like a same?
It's
when
the
we think
same.
of Radha
Exactly.
Krishna's? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, it's one of the reasons why there's references. I can give the specific references, but there's references. Well, here's one. In Canto 2, Chapter 3, Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami has answered a question that Maharaj Parikshit asked at the end of the first canto. What's the duty of one who's about to die? What's that subject matter that one should constantly hear, chant, and remember, and worship? It's been answered in 2.5 chapters. At the end of that section, Maharaj Parikshit says, Sutta is asked by Shaunak Rishi, oh, these two, they're perfect souls from their birth. So whatever they said further beyond that, it must have been about Hari, and the topics of Hari are at purifying for the soul completely. And that which is in relation to Hari is indirect, but it leads to the topics of Hari. That's equally purifying. And then he starts speaking about the devotees of the Lord, because it's not exactly speaking about the Lord, but it's the devotees of the Lord leads to topics of the Lord, or it's connected to the Lord because they're pure devotees. So they're as purifying as hearing about Krishna. And then a detail is Krishna is even more pleased when he hears about the glorification of his devotees. So the answer, that's a detail, but the answer is yes. It's as purifying.
Thank you very much, Guru Maharaj.
Over here, right in front. No, in the front.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. When Dhruva Maharaj was doing the meditation, and when Lord Vishnu appears in front of him, immediately his meditation is broke, and no longer Vishnu was there in his heart. He felt...
It's not that Lord Vishnu was no longer in his heart. The vision was no longer in his heart.
Vision. And can you kindly just elaborate more, like how gopis, even though when they were in the separation from Krishna, and still Krishna was there in their heart? Is that what we were?
The distinct, there's two things. When Krishna appears, when Vishnu or Krishna appear in the heart of the devotee, there's a technical term for it. I can't remember the exactly. Avir or something. It's a sportee. It's a vision that the Lord arranges, and He can then withdraw that vision, both in the heart and outside, both. Now, his disappearing from the heart of Dhruva was for the sake of startling him. The appearing was for the sake of satisfying him. Disappearing was for the sake of startling him so that his meditation would break. And then when he opened his eyes because his meditation broke, he saw that same, and it was the same feature of the Lord standing before him.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay? All the way in the back.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's
Great.
good. Loud and clear.
So in two of the verses you put up, one of them it's talking about how Dhruva, he went to the forest and he was protected, right? By if he's, Krishna's going to protect him. And then also later, I don't remember exactly if it was a verse in the Bhagavatam or if it was just a Prabhupada comment, but it talked about how devotee, this world's problematic, but, devotees, if there are certain, caliber or something, but they don't have those same problems. So I'm wondering is that more does that mean that they, same with with the protection and the finding, this material world to not be problematic. Does that not mean that everything's perfect
No.
and great? It's more that
Definitely not.
it's more like their viewpoint or their,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
cool. So it's not like difficulties don't come,
Oh.
but it's the way they handle them and everything.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. Thank you.
Here's a nice example. When Prabhupada, shortly after Prabhupada took sannyas, he was gored by a cow in a marketplace. And he had no one to take care of him. But misfortune came right after something very wonderful. So it's not that you never stub your toe or never have a hardship. He endured many hardships. I mean, there's details, many hardships. Up over here.
Maharaj, your title for this talk is Achieve or Receive. So here we see that Dhruva Maharaj is trying to achieve, but then because he was able to receive, that's when the success came. That's what the
title was meant to be catchy. It was catchy. You caught it. But yes, he was in a, I'm going to do it. The doership, kartaham mood. But that's not going to do it. So one has to prepare oneself. Even if you start with the doership, they have to be the receivership mood. And then...
And in Dhruva's case, he had both.
Well, he let go of the achieving and came to the receiving. Because of that intimacy, of that connection. Extraordinary intimacy. Anyone else? Okay. Well, congratulations all of you for sitting through all this discussion very patiently. So we'll end there, and we have something online?
Yeah. It's from Hema Suryavanshi Mataji, and her question is how to deal with weakness of heart. I mean, I plan the goals in mind but not able to apply. What to do?
We discussed Hridaya Dorbalya extensively the other evening. So rather than do a reset, a rerun, I encourage you to listen to the recording from Friday evening, because we spent a good amount of time on that topic. And then you'll be very happy. You can hear it just because it's recorded. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.